He said, "You don't have to go yet," and his hand stayed on mine. I've replayed that night in my mind more times than I can count. It wasn't dramatic, not at first. There was no fireworks display, no drunken confession, no sudden kiss that rewrote my world in one motion. No, it was quieter than that, softer, the kind of moment that sneaks into your life and stays there, echoing, until you realize it changed everything. It began the way so many nights with him did, unremarkably. A few drinks after class, an excuse to hang out at his place because he had a new playlist to show me, or a new bottle of whiskey we were apparently obligated to finish. By then, we had grown comfortable in each other's spaces. He didn't ask anymore if I was coming over. He just assumed I would. And I never hesitated. We had built something, though back then, I couldn't quite name it. Friendship, sure. Camaraderie. Maybe even brotherhood, though that word felt too stiff, too distant, for the way my chest tightened when he smiled. There was something underneath it all, something neither of us said aloud. That night, the house was quiet. His roommates were gone. The living room dim except for a warm lamp in the corner. Music hummed low in the background, nothing with lyrics, just the kind of instrumental soundtrack that made silence feel less lonely. We were sitting side by side on his couch, the space between us closer than friends usually allow. I remember thinking I should leave soon. It was late and I had an early morning. That was the logical thought, the responsible one. But responsibility didn't feel as heavy when I was sitting next to him. Still, I muttered something like, "I should probably get going." And that's when he said it. "You don't have to go yet." Simple. Ordinary. But the words landed like a weight in my chest. I looked at him, searching his face for meaning. He wasn't smirking like he usually did when he teased me, wasn't joking the way he did when he wanted to dodge sincerity. His expression was calm, almost vulnerable. And then, as if to make sure I didn't miss it, his hand stayed on mine. It wasn't a sudden grab, just a gentle pressure, his fingers brushing over mine, settling there like it was the most natural thing in the world. I froze because nothing about it felt casual to me. His hand was warm, grounding, and I could feel the unspoken question pulsing in that quiet contact. "Do you feel it too?" My heart was pounding so hard I thought he must have heard it. And here's the part one can't stop replaying. I didn't pull away. I didn't laugh it off or make a joke to diffuse the moment. I just let it happen. My hand stayed under his, and for the first time, I let myself wonder if this, whatever this was, had been building all along. We didn't say anything at first. The music filled the silence, but underneath it, the air was thick with everything unsaid. I wanted to ask him what it meant. I wanted to tell him I had thought about this. About him. More nights than I'd ever admit. But words felt dangerous, too sharp for the fragile thing forming between us. So I stayed quiet, and so did he. Instead, he shifted closer, his shoulder brushing mine. That simple contact, shoulder to shoulder, hand to hand, felt more intimate than any kiss I'd ever had. I realized then that intimacy wasn't always about grand gestures. Sometimes it was about the smallest touch held just a little too long. I should have been scared, and maybe part of me was. But more than that, I felt safe. Safe in a way I hadn't in years. With him, I didn't have to hide the way I usually did. He had this way of making me feel seen, even when I was trying to disappear. And I think that's why I didn't move. We talked eventually, but not about what was happening. Our conversation wandered, movies we wanted to watch, people we both knew, stupid inside jokes that only made sense to us. But all the while, his hand stayed on mine. It was a quiet claim, unspoken but undeniable. Every so often, his thumb would trace absent circles against my skin, almost as if he didn't realize he was doing it. I don't think he knew how much it was unraveling me. Every small motion, every brush of his skin against mine, was like a confession he wasn't ready to speak. And maybe I wasn't ready to hear. Because here's the truth. I had feelings for him. Feelings I had buried, dismissed, told myself were just byproducts of closeness. But in that moment, all those excuses crumbled. Sitting there, with his hand covering mine, I couldn't lie to myself anymore. I wanted him, not just as a friend, not just as someone to laugh with at 2 a.m., but in a way that scared me. What I didn't know, what I still don't fully know, was whether he wanted me to. He wasn't the type to make things obvious. He had girlfriends, casual flings that came and went. He never labeled himself the way some people do. If anyone had asked him, I'm sure he would have said he was straight. But that night, sitting there with him, nothing about the way he held me felt straight. Nothing about it felt like just a friend. Still, the doubt gnawed at me. Was I reading too much into it? Was I mistaking comfort for intimacy, affection for desire? Couldn't be sure. All I knew was that I didn't want the moment to end. Eventually, it had to. The clock ticked later. The night deepened, and the reality of tomorrow crept back in. I shifted, reluctantly pulling my hand back. For the briefest moment, I felt his fingers tighten, as if he didn't want to let go. But then he released me, and the space between us grew. I stood, made some excuse about really needing to leave this time. He walked me to the door like always, but there was something different in the way he looked at me, something I still can't name. And just before I left, he said it again. Softer this time, almost a whisper. You didn't have to go. I smiled, forced and nervous, and stepped into the night. But inside I was burning, because maybe he was right. Maybe I didn't have to go. Maybe I should have stayed. And maybe, if I had, everything would be different now. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling in my darkened room, my mind replaying every second on loop. The pressure of his hand on mine. The way his thumb had brushed small circles into my skin, absent-minded and yet deliberate all at once. The tone of his voice when he said, "You don't have to go yet." It wasn't just the words. It was how he said them, low, almost careful, like he was trying not to scare me away. And then again at the door, "You didn't have to go." Those words haunted me. I wondered if he knew what they had done to me. If he understood how, in a matter of hours, my carefully built walls had cracked wide open. I had spent months convincing myself I could handle being close to him without wanting more. That I could laugh at his jokes, crash on his couch, listen to his late-night confessions, and keep my feelings neatly hidden. But that night proved me wrong. His hand staying on mine had undone me. And here's the worst part. I didn't know what it meant to him. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe he was drunker than I realized and didn't think twice about touching me that way. Maybe he was just lonely, grasping for warmth in the most convenient form. Or maybe, just maybe, he felt something too. The not knowing was torture. The next day, when I saw him again, everything looked the same on the surface. He was his usual self. Playful, sarcastic, tossing out jokes like they were candy. He didn't mention what had happened, didn't act like anything had shifted between us. And for a second, I wondered if I had imagined it all. If my mind had spun a whole story from a simple touch. But then I'd catch him looking at me. Quick, fleeting glances that vanished the moment I noticed. Or his arm would brush mine just a little longer than necessary. His laugh a little softer when it was directed at me. They were small things, but they set me on fire inside. It felt like we were dancing on the edge of something neither of us dared to name. Weeks passed, and those moments piled up. Nights when he'd throw his arm casually over the back of the couch and let it rest against my shoulders. Afternoons when we'd walk together, his hand grazing mine as though by accident, but never pulling away quickly enough for it to really be accidental. And those words, "You don't have to go," they lingered like an unspoken invitation every time I was at his place. But he never said more. And neither did I, because saying it out loud would have changed everything. And maybe that was the problem. I was terrified of ruining what we had. Our friendship had become the center of my life. He was the person I told everything to, the one I turned to when I didn't want to face the world alone. If I confessed what I really felt, if I leaned into that night and asked what it meant, I risked losing him. And the thought of losing him felt worse than the ache of wanting him. So I stayed silent. But silence doesn't erase longing. It only feeds it. One night, a couple of months later, we were sitting on his porch, the two of us wrapped in hoodies against the cool air. He was smoking, the faint glow of the cigarette tip flickering in the dark, and I was nursing a beer. We weren't talking much, just the occasional comment about the stars, the neighbors, some song stuck in his head. And then, out of nowhere, he said, "You ever think about us?" The words nearly made me drop my bottle. Us. I asked, my voice unsteady. He shrugged, staring out into the dark like he hadn't just dropped a bomb in my lap. Yeah, like you and me. I don't know. Sometimes I wonder. I didn't breathe. Couldn't. My heart was slamming against my ribs, every nerve on fire. This was it, the moment I had been replaying and dreading and hoping for all at once. But then he laughed, quick and sharp, like he was trying to cover it up. Forget it. I'm just drunk. And just like that, the door slammed shut again. But the thing about doors is they never close all the way once they've been opened, even a little. That single question, you ever think about us? Lodged itself inside me, refusing to leave, because the answer was yes. I thought about us all the time. I thought about him when I was half asleep, when I was walking to class, when I was scrolling through my phone in the middle of the night. I thought about his laugh, his stupid impressions, the way his eyes softened when he was tired. I thought about how his hand had stayed on mine that night, and how my body had come alive under his touch. I thought about how badly I wanted to know what it would feel like if he ever pulled me closer. But I didn't say any of that. I just laughed with him, brushed it off, and pretended like he hadn't just exposed the very thing I was most afraid to admit. I went home that night feeling hollow. And that's when it hit me we were both trapped. Him in his silence, me in my fear. And in the space between us was something fragile and electric that neither of us had the courage to reach for. Looking back now, I wonder if we were waiting for each other. If he was waiting for me to make the first move, and I was waiting for him. And in all that waiting, we let something slip through our fingers. But I still can't forget that night on the couch. His hand over mine, his voice soft in the dim light. You don't have to go yet. Because maybe, in that moment, we had everything. Sometimes I wonder if the universe gives us those moments, tiny flashes of possibility, just to see what we'll do with them. And maybe the tragedy isn't when they disappear, but when we're too afraid to reach out and hold them before they slip away. For weeks after that porch conversation, I kept searching for signs. Every glance, every joke, every brush of his hand against mine. I dissected them like puzzle pieces, desperate to make them form a picture. And I kept going back to that night, the first night he told me I didn't have to go. Because it felt like a beginning. But beginnings are fragile. They can vanish if no one chooses to step forward. One night, we were at his place again, sprawled out across his living room floor, empty pizza box beside us. He was flipping through songs on his laptop, pausing every now and then to play me something he swore I had to hear. He loved showing me music, like he wanted me to carry little pieces of him wherever I went. I was half listening, half watching him. The way his hair fell into his eyes when he leaned forward, the curve of his smile when he found a song he loved. I remember thinking, God, I wish I could just tell you. And then, as if reading my mind, he glanced at me and asked, why do you always look at me like that? My throat went dry. Like what? He shrugged, a smirk tugging at his lips. I don't know. Like I'm something. I laughed too quickly, deflecting. Don't flatter yourself. But inside I was spiraling. Because he was something. He was everything. And I hated how much he knew without me saying a word. The song changed. Something slow and heavy. And the room fell into silence. I could feel him looking at me, but I didn't dare meet his eyes. My hands itched to reach for him, to bridge the distance. But I stayed frozen. Afraid. And then, like déjà vu, he said softly, you don't have to go yet. The same words. The same invitation. And this time I didn't move. I stayed. We stayed. Hours passed. At some point, he lay down on the floor, his arm brushing mine, and then, without asking, he let his head rest on my shoulder. My whole body tensed at first, overwhelmed by the closeness, by the sheer weight of his trust. And then, slowly, I relaxed. I let myself lean back against him. It was the most natural thing in the world. We didn't talk. We didn't joke. We just breathed together in that dimly lit room, his hand resting loosely near mine. Every once in a while, his fingers would twitch, like he was thinking about reaching for me but couldn't quite do it. I wanted to take his hand. God, I wanted it more than anything. But the fear stopped me, the fear of ruining the moment, of shattering the fragile balance we had built. So I let the silence hold us instead. At some point, his breathing slowed, and I realized he'd fallen asleep against me. I sat there, frozen but content, terrified to move in case I woke him. And in that quiet, with his weight pressed against me, I thought, this is it. This is the closest I'll ever get to him. It was both beautiful and heartbreaking all at once. Because as much as I cherished it, I knew it wasn't enough. I didn't want pieces of him. I wanted the whole thing. I wanted to stop wondering, stop guessing, stop settling for almost. But I didn't wake him. I didn't confess. I just sat there until the sun began to rise, painting the room in pale light. Eventually, I slipped out from under him, careful not to disturb his sleep. I left quietly, my chest aching, my heart both full and broken. And the whole walk home, I kept hearing his voice in my head. You don't have to go yet. Felt like a plea, like a promise, like something we were both too scared to name. But here's the thing about moments, they don't last forever. And the ones you don't act on, they fade. Over time, the closeness between us began to shift. Not in ways anyone else would notice, but I felt it. He stopped letting his hand linger on mine. Stopped saying those words at the end of the night. Stopped resting his head against my shoulder. We never talked about it. We never acknowledged the subtle retreat. But I could feel the walls rebuilding between us, brick by brick. And I hated it, because it meant that whatever had been there, that fragile, beautiful something, was slipping away. And I didn't know how to stop it. Maybe he was scared. Maybe he met someone else. Maybe he convinced himself that what happened was just a fluke, a product of late nights and too much whiskey. Or maybe he was waiting for me to be brave. And I wasn't. I still remember the last time he touched me the way he used to. We were saying goodbye after a night out, standing in the glow of the streetlight. He hugged me, longer than usual, his hand lingering on the back of my neck. For a second, I thought he was going to kiss me. My breath caught, my heart stuttered, but then he pulled back, smiled that easy smile and walked away. And just like that, it was over. We stayed friends, of course. We still hung out, still laughed, still shared pieces of our lives. But it wasn't the same. The intimacy had faded, replaced by something safer, something easier to explain. But every now and then, when the night grew quiet and the world fell away, I'd hear his voice in my head again. You don't have to go yet. And I'd wonder what might have happened if, just once, I had stayed. Time has a way of blurring details but not feelings. Years later, I don't remember every joke we told, every song he made me listen to, or every night we spent sprawled across his couch. But I remember how it felt. I remember the weight of his hand on mine, the quiet tremor of possibility in the air, the way my chest tightened when he said I didn't have to go. I remember the longing most of all. It clung to me long after he wasn't around as much anymore. Life, as it tends to do, pulled us in different directions. He found new jobs, new relationships, new cities to drift toward. I did the same. But even as years passed, the memory of him lingered, like a song I couldn't get out of my head. We would check in every now and then. A casual text, a phone call once in a blue moon, social media likes, little digital reminders that we still existed in each other's orbit. But the closeness we once had, that sacred, unspoken intimacy, never returned. And yet, whenever I saw his name flash across my screen, I felt that same pang, that same ache. I never told him what those nights meant to me, never admitted that his touch had ignited something I'd been too afraid to face, never confessed that I had wanted him, loved him even, in ways that friendship alone couldn't contain. Instead, I kept it inside, locked away in the corners of my chest where no one could see. Until one night, years later, when nostalgia got the better of me. I was sitting in my apartment, scrolling aimlessly, when I stumbled across an old photo. One of the two of us, grinning like idiots, arms slung around each other's shoulders. My throat tightened. The ache came rushing back, sharp and fresh as if no time had passed. On impulse, I sent him a message. Something simple. Hey, remember this night? I didn't expect much. Maybe a LOL yeah or a memory about the party we'd been at. But what I got instead stopped me cold. Of course I do. That was one of the best nights of my life. I stared at the screen, heart hammering. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure of what to say. Should I ask why? Should I tell him it was one of mine too? Should I finally say what I'd held back all those years? Before I could decide, another message came through. Sometimes I still think about us, about what could have been. The breath left my body. My hands shook. I read the words over and over, hardly believing them. After all this time, after all the silence, here he was, admitting what I had always suspected, what I had always longed to hear. I didn't know what to type. My mind was a storm of memories, regrets, hopes I thought I'd buried. The words I wanted to say, me too. I've always thought about us. I've never stopped. Sat heavy on my tongue. But fear, even after all those years, kept me quiet. So instead, I replied with something safer. Something that wouldn't risk too much. Yeah. Me too sometimes. It was a coward's response, I know. But it was all I could manage. He didn't push further. Just sent back a smiley face, then changed the subject. We talked for a while about work, life, the little nothings that fill the spaces between people who used to be everything to each other. And then the conversation fizzled out like they always do. But I couldn't stop thinking about what he'd said. Sometimes I still think about us, about what could have been. Felt like both a gift and a wound. A gift because it meant I hadn't been alone in my longing. A wound because it was too late. Whatever us might have been, it was lost to time, buried beneath years of hesitation. Still, that night, lying in bed, I found myself smiling through the ache. Because maybe, in some alternate version of our lives, we had been brave. Maybe in that version, when he told me I didn't have to go yet, I stayed. Maybe we figured it out together. And maybe that was enough for me, to know that the possibility had been real, that I hadn't imagined it, that for at least one night, and maybe more, he had wanted me to. The thing about love, especially the kind that never quite makes it into the light, is that it doesn't always end neatly. It doesn't wrap itself up with answers or closure. Sometimes it just lingers, unfinished, like a half-written song. But even unfinished songs can stay with you forever. Now, when I think of him, I don't just think of the ache. I think of the way he made me laugh until my ribs hurt. The way he sang off-key in the car but never cared. The way he made ordinary nights feel like something worth holding on to. And yes, I think of his hand on mine. Of his voice in the dim light saying, "You don't have to go yet." Because that was his way of telling me, without saying the words, that he wanted me close. That, for a moment at least, he saw me the way I saw him. And maybe that's the hope I carry with me. That even if it wasn't forever, even if it wasn't everything I wanted, it was real. It was ours. Sometimes, late at night, I let myself rewrite the story. In my mind, I go back to that first night. The dim glow of the lamp, the quiet music filling the spaces between us, the warmth of his hand over mine. But instead of freezing, instead of letting fear root me in silence, I turn my hand over and lace my fingers through his. I imagine the way his breath would catch, the way his eyes would flicker to mine. I imagine myself leaning in, closing the distance, pressing my lips to his, soft at first, tentative, but certain. I imagine him kissing me back. In that version, I don't leave when he says, "You don't have to go yet." I stay. We stay. And everything changes. But that's just a dream. A story I tell myself when the ache grows too heavy. Because the truth is, I didn't stay. I left. And the silence that followed shaped everything that came after. I used to punish myself for that. For not being braver. For letting fear dictate my choices. I'd think, if only you had stayed. If only you had said something. If only, if only, if only. But as the years passed, I realized something. Maybe the beauty of that night wasn't in what could have happened. Maybe it was in what did. Two boys, caught between friendship and something more, sitting in a quiet living room, holding on to each other in the only way they knew how. It was imperfect. It was incomplete. But it was real. And real moments, even the unfinished ones, matter. I've carried that night with me into every relationship since. Not as a comparison, not as a ghost to chase, but as a reminder of how much intimacy can live in the smallest gestures. A hand resting on yours. A voice telling you not to go. A silence that speaks louder than words. It taught me that love doesn't always announce itself with fireworks. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it brushes against your skin so lightly you almost miss it. Sometimes it's just two people too scared to name what's already there. And yes, it taught me about heartbreak too. About the ache of almost, the weight of silence, the sting of what's left unsaid. But even that has its own kind of beauty, because heartbreak means you cared. It means you risked enough to feel something worth losing. I don't know where he is tonight. Maybe sitting on another porch in another city, smoking a cigarette under unfamiliar stars. Maybe laughing in someone else's living room, his head tilted back, eyes crinkling the way they always did. Maybe he's with someone who loves him the way I once wanted to, openly, fearlessly, without hesitation. I hope he is, truly, because despite the ache, despite the regrets, I don't want him to be lonely. I don't want him to wonder forever about what could have been. I want him to find what we were both too scared to reach for back then. As for me, I've learned to carry him gently, to hold our story not as a wound but as a keepsake. A reminder of the boy who once held my hand in the quiet and made me feel seen in a way I hadn't before. And if I could go back, if I could sit across from my younger self in that dimly lit living room, I think I'd tell him this: it's okay that you didn't stay. It's okay that you were scared. You're going to carry this with you, yes, but it won't break you. In fact, it'll teach you how to love better, fuller, braver. And one day, when someone else reaches for your hand, you'll remember what it felt like to almost lose that moment. And you won't let go this time. Because that's the hope I hold on to. That every almost teaches us how to recognize the real thing when it finally comes. Maybe that's why I still hear his voice sometimes, even now. Not haunting, not painful, but tender. A reminder. You don't have to go yet. And maybe, in some way, I never really did. Maybe part of me is still there. In that living room, his hand on mine, my heart pounding with everything I couldn't say. But maybe that's okay. Because even unfinished stories are worth telling. Even love that never fully bloomed can change you. And even the softest, quietest moments, the ones you think no one will ever remember, can echo for a lifetime.